Hello, wildlings. I'm your Creepsmith, and you found my Fear Forge. Lucky you.
Remember when you used to have dreams that weren't nightmares? Good times. Tonight's story, Underneath Reality, by WiltedRose52. When I was a kid, I had this recurring nightmare that always preceded the death of a loved one. It wasn't quite a premonition. I didn't know who was going to die or how they would die or even when, only that it would be within the next few days to a week. I had the dream a few times before I figured out the link between the dream and the deaths. Now, these were ordinary deaths. Elderly relatives dying of old age, my grandfather's terminal cancer, my aunt who lost a child during preterm labor. I grieved for each lost loved one. The dream itself was short. It took place within this massive white room, so big that I couldn't even see the walls. Maybe there weren't any walls. It was like I was looking through a rip in reality, or more like I was seeing behind the fabric of the reality that we live in, seeing the machine that operates our universe. I say machine because it was cold, so mechanical. In the vast nothingness of all white, I would see this gray, not quite steel cable extending as far as the eye could see. And on the cable was a massive black sphere. Now, no light reflected off of this sphere, and in this too bright white plane, the sphere was impossibly dark, as if it absorbed any light around it. The sphere would move swiftly along the cable until suddenly the rest of the cable would just vanish, and the sphere would stop instantly without any slowing or shedding momentum, and a wall would appear. A too bright wall that was indistinguishable from the rest of the too bright whiteness, but I would know it was there. On the wall, a name was printed. At least I always assumed that it was a name. I can never picture it after I woke up. This wall would only stay for a split second, but in the dream, it seemed like an eternity. Everything around me would evaporate, and I'd have this feeling in my entire body that was a combination of pure weightlessness, that feeling you get when you're about to fall, and utter, all-consuming dread. In that split second, someone ended. It was an absolute ending, like there's no afterlife, no heaven or hell after the certainty of that mechanism. I'd wake up, gasping, crying, completely disoriented. The first time I remember having this dream, it was when I was 7 years old, although by then it was already familiar to me, so I'm sure that I was even younger than that when it first started. I was raised Catholic, and I was actually pretty religious when I was a kid. This dream was the antithesis of all the religion I'd been exposed to. I tried to ignore it at first, tried to forget about the dream. I had it a couple of more times after that. When I was 9, I had it 3 nights in a row. Then my great-grandma passed away, and the night it happened, I was dream-free. I realized what that meant, and I tried talking to my parents about it. They just chalked it up to grief and an overactive imagination. I tried talking to the school counselor about it. She, of course, went to my parents. At the time, my parents were going through a rough patch, and this was made worse by having to foster and provide for 3 of my cousins, plus my brother and I overheard phrases like seeking attention, acting out, maybe he got it from his books, needs more socialization. I tried talking to our church's priest about it, too, who seemed very skeptical and just told me that I had to have faith in God and pray more. After that, I learned my lesson, and I stopped talking about it. The dream came again when I was 10, and I guessed, correctly, I know now, that it was my grandfather who had been ill for some time with terminal brain cancer. I convinced my dad that they should go see him that weekend. He lived a couple of hours away from us with his wife. My grandpa passed the night after they arrived. I tried researching the dream, but unlike the movies, neither our school library nor our public library had any books about premonitions, the afterlife, aside from biblical texts, or anything supernatural. The internet wasn't helpful either. This was back in the 90s. And not surprisingly, it's hard to come up with relevant results for something like big black ball precognitive dream death. I picked up dream interpretation as a hobby, and because of all the time that I've spent digging into dream symbols and symbology, I'm pretty good at interpreting other people's dreams. I had it again when I was 11. This was great-grandma. Then again when I was 13. This time, the dream started nightly on September 4th, 2001. By the next week, it had gone on so long I was paranoid and freaking my parents out, mostly because I kept urging them to be careful and telling them that I loved them, well, approximately about 100 times a day. They kept asking what was wrong, but I didn't think they'd believe me, so I didn't tell them. September 11th, 2001 happened, and I didn't have the dream that night. I didn't lose anyone close to me in the attacks, but it was a tragedy felt by the entire nation. The next day, my mom asked me why I'd been so weird all week, and I told her that I had a dream that I knew something bad was going to happen, but I didn't know who it was going to happen to or when. She didn't say anything after that, but I got the feeling that she believed me, and that she was a little scared of it. I was just shy of my 14th when the dream started coming back again. I also had the flu and I was running a fever, so I'm not even sure if that affected me. It might have made me a little delusional, but I spent about a week feeling like I wasn't sure if I was dreaming or not, even though I was awake. 2 nights before my birthday, my fever peaked and I went to bed early. The dreams that night were intense, alternating between my recurring dream and other creepy black and white dreams that I've never been able to remember. What I do remember is sleepwalking. I've always been a sleep talker, but this is the only time that I've ever somnambulated. And I do have lucid dreams quite often where I'm able to change the dream that I'm in and remember it, but this was completely different. I wasn't in control of myself. I knew that I was dreaming, but I was trapped inside myself, like a spectator, helplessly watching as I walked around. Our house was different too. The blinds and curtains had gone from the windows, and instead of the street lamps and lawns outside, there was just black. A flash of light, similar to lightning, would go off and light up the blackness for a split second, but there was no ground, nothing to light up. The inside of the house was stripped bare, down to just the beds. No other furniture, no clothes, toys, towels, anything else that you would normally see lying around the house. Everything was black and white, except the people, my family. I walked around in my sleep, not in control, but fully aware of what was going on, checking all my family members to see if they were alive. Once I checked on all of them, I looked out this big window at the landing of the stairs, and when that lightning-like flash went off, I glimpsed the familiar cable and the giant sphere in the distance. I felt this cold, unforgiving, omnipotent presence behind me, back at the bottom of the stairs, and I knew that I'd been found. Something knew that I had seen behind the curtain and had seen the mechanics operating our world. It was here to fix that problem. I turned to face it, and the next thing I know, it was morning. The sun was shining through the blinds of my bedroom window. The birds were chirping outside. I'm not being dramatic. I remember the chirping very clearly. And I was lying in bed. I felt great. My fever was gone, and the flu that had me in bed for a week disappeared overnight. It was a beautiful morning, the stuff of fairy tales, minus the singing animated birds and animals that help with the chores. I was utterly confused by it because it had seemed like a second ago I had been nearly face to face with something that didn't want me peeking behind that rip in reality. I was still filled with such dread, and I ran downstairs to find my mom to ask if everything was okay. And now that I think about it, I should probably apologize to her for that morning, because I'm sure that I scared the hell out of her. The day before, I was so sick that I couldn't keep any food down, and I had to alternate Tylenol and ibuprofen just to keep my fever below 104. Then, that morning, I was running around looking much better, except that I was obviously scared and asking if everyone was okay. It turned out everyone was fine. Everything was fine. But someone was still going to die, and I had no idea who, or how, or why, or when. I spent the day frustrated and scared because I was powerless to stop whatever was going to happen, and even though that presence was gone, there's not really a guarantee when it comes to forces that are beyond mortal comprehension. I tried not to think about the sleepwalking. I was in no way ready to begin to wonder what had happened there. No dreams that night. I slept great, but I awoke with a heavy heart because I knew what that meant. It was my birthday, but I wasn't celebrating. Around 5 p.m. that evening, my mom came into my room and sat on my bed right by me. She was trying to hold back sobs as she told me that a friend of mine was in his parents' van with his dad driving, his mom in the front seat, and his sister sitting next to him, heading into town the night before. For some reason, they think maybe an animal ran into the road. The van swerved and went off the side of the road, flipping upside down, and landed in the river. Several hours later, someone was driving by and saw frost on a tire that was barely sticking out of the water. They called it in. The entire family had drowned. It took me years to find an uneasy peace with what had happened. I felt such guilt, like I could have prevented it, like I could have stopped any of it. Losing my friend and his family was devastating to me. They were wonderful people. And although my friend and I were young, we could have been lifelong friends eventually. I never had the dream again. I've tried again and again to make sense out of it, but I never really found anything close to what I experienced. I know I didn't cause any of these deaths, that I was just someone who either by chance or for an unknown reason saw through this immersive illusion that we call reality, and I got a glimpse into the mechanism behind it. I don't feel like I was punished by the presence I felt. I think it simply closed up that rift that I was seeing through. I still don't understand any of it. I don't think we're able to understand. We're just not meant to. So stay scary, wildlings. and make the most of your nights.